Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Snyder from West Manchester Township PD in Pennsylvania. 37 total years in law enforcement. He has a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. He's a graduate of the FBI National Academy, a graduate of the Northwestern University School of Police Staff and Command, a father of three daughters, and I just learned also a dog. One dog, right?
Two dogs,
Two
actually.
dogs.
Yep, yep.
Welcome to the show, Chief Snyder. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Looking forward to it. One of the things that you put in your bio that I intentionally left out that I wanted to talk to you about was that you consider being a father to be the most rewarding role. And I thought that that was such a cool sentence to put in your bio because I think we oftentimes focus so much on personal accolades and achievements and all the things that we've done. But for you to say, hey, the most rewarding role of them all is being a dad, I thought was really cool.
Yeah, thank you. It definitely is. And I think that's where we all need to be grounded. Families come first, right? With my employees and my coworkers, I've always told them family comes first, the job is second. And if you forget about that, I think that's a really big mistake. So I know early in my career as an administrator or even as a when I was a lieutenant, then a chief, I missed some things I think I shouldn't have missed. So I always stress to the people now that work for me, if you can avoid missing it, don't miss it, right? Like make that a priority. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I agree. And I have done the same. I think
Yeah.
that a lot of us can relate to that, and when you know better, you can do better. And hopefully you can help other people to do better by sharing the things that maybe we didn't do the best or sharing some of those I wish statements with other people so that they can make better decisions. But I did the same thing and I've had to, really self-assess throughout my life and my career because I thought it was all or nothing. I thought that the only way to be successful in my career is if I sacrificed absolutely everything else in my personal life to get there. And I've had to ask myself questions, do I think that I could have still been successful if I would have also prioritized myself and my family? And I have a little bit of a toss up sometimes, but I think ultimately, yes, I would have been successful, maybe not as quickly. But I also would have had my family intact and I wouldn't have regrets thinking that I should have spent more time and quality time with people who are no longer on this earth that I wish I could have had one more day with. And I don't have the opportunity because I was, busy on a work trip, instead of being there when they needed me.
Right. Well, for me, my daughters were born 10 years apart. So I had a daughter, and then 10 years later, I had twins.
Mm,
So of course, with the first daughter, I missed quite a bit of things that I shouldn't have missed. With the other two, I've made a commitment I'm not going to miss anything. So I try to make everything I can. There's obvious times when I can't, but if we have an emergency or if I have a meeting that is scheduled and something conflicts, I have to make a decision. And I generally try to prioritize them over my job. And it's a balance.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's a balancing act. I always kind of see, I'm a visual person, so I see us almost like walking a tightrope, like balancing plates and juggling at the same time
Sure.
and being like, how do we keep everything, afloat? And I have to ask myself a lot of times, am I doing the right things? If I am saying no or if I am missing something, is it absolutely necessary or is it not? And I've had to, in my own life, almost create buckets of priority levels.
Sure.
And, everyone can relate to, there's always going to be another thing to do. Always. There's always
Yeah.
going to be another email. There's always going to be another task. There's always going to be something more to do. And so for me, I had to, divide those things up and say, is this something that's of urgent importance where this has to happen right now, do or die, or else? Or is it something that's kind of medium where yes, it's important, but it can wait a little while, like maybe I want to do this within the next 24 hours. And then the other one is like, hey, not really high priority at all. This can wait a couple days while I get caught up or, while I do the things I need to do that are more of a priority. And I think that when you can do that, it allows you to take a breath because for me, and I don't know if you can relate to this, I've always had such a strong work ethic that I felt like for a lot of my career and my life, everything was high priority. Everything was urgent. I had to do everything all at once. And when you're able to kind of take a breath and understand, okay, maybe there's only like two or three things that really need to be done right now, and everything else can kind of wait, it gives you space so that you can then prioritize other things in your life that are important.
Sure. It's like a life in basket exercise, right?
Yep.
Like we do those a lot of times when we're applying for executive positions. They do an in basket exercise. It's kind of like that. We do that every day. You get a list of things you have to take care of. And you have to decide what's number one, number two, number three, and then it goes on.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's important, because then, where does your kid's soccer game play into that
Right.
list? Where
Right.
does where
Yep.
does where does the dance recital play into that list?
That's right.
And I've had a couple chiefs actually tell me that they and I think discipline is not the right word, but maybe they um, you know talk a little smack to their employees if they miss things. It's almost like I'm going to be mad if I find out that you missed that, because I want to make sure that you don't miss those things. Like, what do we need to do to
Yeah.
make sure that you can make those things? And so I think previously the conversation was always like, maybe you would get in trouble if you had to take off work to go do certain things, or maybe if you needed a day off to spend with your family, that those were things that were frowned upon. But now I think the conversation with leadership that I have today is there's more openness and receptiveness and almost an expectation that you should prioritize your family and we can figure it out.
Yeah. It's much different than when I started in this job. When
Yeah.
I started in this job, you were expected to miss things. That was just the way it was. And there was no tolerance for anything else beyond that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you find that it's been a positive change?
Yeah. In some respects, I think it's a good thing. I think everyone needs to prioritize their families. There are times, though, it's kind of tough because there are times when the organization, and I say the organization being the police department, right? One of the things I tell my executive staff is the organization must be a priority, right? Beyond yourself. And what I mean by that is not your family, but you have to take care of the organization because then everything else falls below it. That's kind of contradictory to what we talked about, but your family's above that. And then there's the organization and then, everything else beyond that. But yeah, I agree with you. It's a balance. You have to balance it. It's tough. But I do think it's better to let people your employees, especially when they have special things going on. Now, I'll give you an example. We have a department meeting coming up this month. It's a mandatory department meeting. One of my employees, his they're having a baby, and he said to me this morning, "Hey, I may not be able to make the meeting." I said, "I think I understand. If you're having a baby and you're not going to make it, I think I can completely understand that." So,
Yeah.
as a joke, that was kind of the joke between the two of us. I said, "Yeah, I think I'm good with that." So, and that's obviously a priority for him to be there, but
Of course.
other things also are. But it's a balance. It certainly is a balance.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't think it's a zero sum game. I think that you can show up and you can be effective in your career, and you can also show up and be effective in your personal life. I
Sure.
think that, to what I said earlier, I thought it was all or nothing, and I no longer feel like it's that way. I don't ever think it's going to be 50-50. There's going to be times where, personal life, maybe you're having a baby and that is going to take way more energy out of you, and you're going to be putting more of your time and effort into that. But I think that you can still show up and give it your all when you're there, whether that's at home or that's at work. And it's tiring. It's hard, and it's time management and it's all the things. But I don't think that, just because you are prioritizing both means that you can't be effective in both. I think that you can have it all.
Sure. And if you have a spouse or someone, a co-parent, right? It's not fair to them to put everything on them as well. You have to contribute, and they need to contribute to keep their life balance and life happy, and everybody kind of on the same page. That your children are your priority, and if that's the case, and it should be, you should contribute whatever part of that partnership you are, whether you're the mother, the father, whatever, whatever that uh, whatever the partnership is. And today it's could be anything, right? It could be two women, it could be two men, whatever that is. You have to make a contribution, and that's what you need to, I think, focus on is what are you contributing to and what you should be contributing to, and then the same thing with your job. So it is tough, but your family should come first.
Yeah.
So
I was going to ask you, obviously you said things look different now than they did when you first started. And I know a lot of leadership who have been, in this career as long as you feel the same. How have you been able to, as a leader, adapt and evolve, how you view things, how you show up, how you are able to provide for the organization as times and things have changed?
okay, so I'm going to give you I'm going to give you one of the things that I say a lot to other police officers that they kind of laugh at. So when I became a police officer and I was what you call a street officer or a patrolman, I thought I knew all the answers, and it was easy to give the answers. When I saw something happen and I disagreed with it, I was like, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that. I'd have done this and I'd have done that." And the higher I went up in rank, it seemed like the dumber I got because the questions became harder and harder to answer, right? The more responsibility you have within the organization, the tougher the answers are to produce. And those decisions become more difficult. And the more people that are affected by your decisions, the more difficult they are, right? So when I was a patrolman, I saw a lot of things that I didn't agree with. I saw leadership that maybe wasn't what I thought it should be. I saw police officers treated maybe in a bad way that I didn't agree with, whether it was discipline or terminations or just treatment in general, right? So you kind of take all that in as you're moving up through the ranks, and you say, I'm not going to do that, right? Like when I become a sergeant or I become a lieutenant or I become a chief, I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to fix that, or I'm going to make sure that the people under me don't get treated the way I was, right? Or that person was. And some of it was me too. I experienced some things that I thought were unfair. Some of it I probably deserved, but other things I didn't think I did. So when you get that opportunity, right, you say to yourself, I'm going to do this right. And you try to do it the right way. It doesn't always work out that way. But I think I learned a lot from all the leaders I had before I became a chief and my colleagues around the area that you kind of go to and ask questions. But I saw somewhat bad leadership that I learned from too. What not to do, maybe, how not to treat people. And then I had other good bosses that taught me how to treat people and how to be a leader and how to make decisions and how to evaluate things, and all those, they were all contributors to what I think I am today. I'm certainly not perfect. I'm a better version of myself than I was in 2008. I can tell you that
Yeah.
when I became a chief first. But I'm certainly a long way away from being perfect.
Well, I think that, I would hope that all of our goals are, to be better than we were, you
Yeah,
know, and there's the 1% rule, right? And it's like, how can we just be 1% better each day? What are those things that we can do? Um,
yeah,
and I think in order for us to get better, we have to be willing to learn. We have to be willing to adapt and evolve and ask questions and be curious about things. And, I appreciate you saying that, like, you're not perfect, because I think that in order for us to grow and be better, there has to be a little bit of humility to what we do and understand that we are going to make mistakes. And even where we are today, we might look back on this day in 5 years from now and be like, wow, I didn't know as much as I know now. And I think that that's the beautiful thing about life is that we have the opportunity to continue to evolve and grow. But having, the ability to stay grounded as well and understand that like it's never a destination, we never arrive. And I think as soon as we think that we are the best and that, we've arrived and that's it, that's when maybe we should find something new to do because
Yeah,
I think that's when we shut ourselves off from learning and growing.
sure.
Yeah. I
Much
uh,
agreed.
I wanted to ask you because you said that you learned from, other leaders and colleagues and, maybe what to do, what not to do. What are some of the qualities that you think a really good leader should have?
Wow. Um, well, in this profession, I think there's a number of things that you admire from people above you when you moved up, right? But I think support is a big issue. I think in today's world, the people under you need to know that you support them and you will be behind them, even if they make a mistake. And I'm not saying you say you cover for it, but I'm saying you might acknowledge it's a mistake, but you still support them and provide whatever protection you can for them. And if they obviously do something way beyond the pale, right? You just straight up say to them, I care about you, I support you, but there's going to be consequences for what you just did, right? So those things happen. Other things I think I've seen is being calm in the face of like stress, and I that's one of the things that it's hard for me to master at times. But I think when a leader arrives at a scene or an incident that's going on, and they calm things down immediately when they show up, and you look at that leader and you're like, he's got this, right? Or they have this, or they have it under control. That's definitely a good quality to have.
Mm.
And I think patience and wisdom in a lot of situations can fix the problem before you make a rash decision. Like I have this policy, and I think it's a pretty common policy that don't respond to anything when you're upset.
Hmm.
I have a 24-hour rule. If I get something that happened and I'm upset about it, I don't write an email. I don't respond. And I've done that when I'm upset and it's been a mistake. And
Yep.
you have to let things digest. And in my younger days, I would have just been, blah, 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 Now I take it in, I evaluate it. I might even talk to somebody about it, get counsel, and then I respond. In a more professional way than I probably would have when I was upset, and that's helped me a lot. So those are some of the things that I think are admirable about people. You gotta like. Somebody once said to me, "Don't ever let them see you sweat." Right, as a police leader, and some of that is really true. If people see you fall apart, they're going to lose respect for you, and that's not going to benefit anybody. So when you're say it's a tactical thing or a shooting or an active incident, you've got to be the one that maintains your composure, because if they see you fall apart, they could fall apart as well, and they need to have a rock there for them. And that's one of the traits that I think is very important. I might have gone off base there. I'm sorry, but if I
No,
did,
I thought that was actually a great answer, and I appreciate that. And a lot of what you were talking about is the ability to have emotional regulation and control.
Mhm.
And that takes practice,
Yes,
and I've heard a lot of people, I call it emotional regulation. I've had other people call it like the second, taking a moment to like
Mhm.
choose how to respond. But we've all sent those emails before, and afterwards we're like, dang
yeah,
it, like
yeah,
shouldn't have
yeah,
done that.
right.
And I actually do the same thing. I don't have a 24-hour rule, but I think I might implement that now moving forward. But something that I've done that has been helpful for me is I will write the email how I actually feel about it,
Yeah,
but I draft it.
that's
And then
smart.
and
Yeah,
then I come back the next day and I go, "Ooh, I'm really glad I didn't send that. Okay, let's
yeah.
figure out how to respond to it now." But I think that it is a trainable skill. And I think for a lot of us, it does take those moments where we didn't do a great job, where we did send that heated email that we regret,
Yeah.
where, maybe we did lose our composure or our cool in a situation. Maybe we do snap at someone when we shouldn't have, maybe we should have taken a breath and responded more professionally. And so I think if we can document those things and then we can ask ourselves, okay, how can we do better next time? That allows us to, build those habits and to be able to train ourselves. But I think it is really important to have control over your emotions. And I teach this a lot because I think when we talk about wellness, a lot of it can feel, I call it like cotton candy, where like it looks really good, it looks pretty, but then there's no substance behind it. It kind of just like disintegrates, and everyone's like, well, what are we even talking about anymore? And so I'm a really big fan of like tactical training and how like this actually applies. And so I teach a 3-step that I think is really helpful for emotional regulation. And I tell people the first step is to control your breath. That's step number one, because where your breath follows, your mind follows. So if your breath is erratic, your mind will be erratic. So if we can first just slow down the breathing and learn to get control over the breath, that's going to help to control the mind, right? So now we're calming down the mind. Then when we have a calm and collected mind, then we can have better control of our actions and our reactions. So control the breath, control the mind, control actions, reactions. I think it's a really simple way to think about it. But we have to start by like taking that deep breath for a second, taking that second.
Much agreed. Yeah, it's a good idea. Like it.
Thank you.
Next time I go to an incident, I'll stop and take a deep breath before I start doing anything. I like it. Yeah.
I mean,
Thank
if
you.
if you can, right?
Sure.
Like in
Sure.
some cases, maybe, it's so funny. I'll go to conferences, or I'll have conversations like during briefing or roll call, and everyone's like, yeah, like I know box breathing, but I can't stop and do my box breathing, if we're in a critical incident. And I'm like, well,
Right.
yeah, there's going to be times where like, maybe you feel like you can't do certain things. And so how can we just regulate? How can we just
Yeah.
like try to keep our breath even? It's not like we're trying to hold our breath. We're not trying to do this crazy thing. It's like, how can we just regulate, as much as possible? And I always tell people, if you can practice it in times where you're not stressed, when you can practice it just regularly, then your body will have muscle memory and it'll know to refer back to those things. So, for example, if on your drive home, you just focus on like even breathing, so inhales and exhales are the same length, and you can just breathe like that on the way back home, then like when you're in traffic and you're like getting annoyed, your body is going to go back to that breathing, that regulation, and then you're not going to be as stressed. So I know that's like a
Right.
very simple example, but like, how can we practice these things when you're not in distress?
Right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So you had shared with me that recently there was an incident with a neighboring department. Can you talk a little bit about what happened? Because I know that this was something that kind of you like lit a fire for you guys when it comes to wellness and the resources that you're offering your agency. But what happened, and what was the result of that moving forward?
Okay. So February of last year, we have a hospital in our jurisdiction, and at the hospital they had a active shooting situation where a suspect came in there who was not acting abnormal, and then out of nowhere pulled a gun out of a bag and shot at a couple employees, and then it became we responded in there as an active shooter situation, and then it kind of changed to a barricade where he locked himself in an ICU area of the hospital. And then as a result of that incident, he came out through a door with a nurse as a hostage, carrying a gun, had his handgun, and he was shot and killed. But then during that incident, 2 officers were shot and a third one was shot and killed.
Mm.
So it was, to say the least, not a good outcome, right? Although no citizens were killed, which I guess in some respects we can look at that and say that's a great thing. but we lost a police officer and we had two officers shot. So when you get to something like that, it's a life-changing incident, I think, for most police officers. When you see a fellow officer deceased or wounded from a gunshot, right? It's those are things you don't see a lot. I've seen them, but not to that degree. That's probably the worst thing that I've seen, at least right after it happened. I wasn't on scene when it happened, so I got there a little bit after it stopped. It was over. I was responding in. It was a weekend. I was responding in, and we had officers from here on the incident, but my executive staff and myself did not get there before the incident was the shooting happened. In other words, so I got there. My staff got there. We were controlling as a crime scene at that point, and the injured people were taken for treatment, but the aftermath was there, and you could see it, the blood, everything else, right? And my officers that were on scene there, and the officers from other departments as well, went through a lot of trauma from that. I mean, and when I say cops go through trauma, we go through trauma just about daily, right? But that is an extreme level of trauma.
Yeah.
And that created, uh, a myriad of problems for cops that were there, for the police officers who were there. And for mine, especially, I think there's a feeling of shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? We could have done this, we could have done that. That always happens. And I don't know if civilians can understand that as much, but when these things happen, we go back through our head a million times. Like, what could we have done different? Maybe we could have done this. Maybe we could have done that. If this would have happened, this wouldn't have happened. If we'd have been set up there, this wouldn't have happened. And we go through this incident recycle in our head all the time. So I had officers that were there that I could see immediately they were traumatized, right? Like I recognized it. Not immediately because I was walking around doing what I was supposed to do, and then the crime scene and all the other work that came along with it. And then I saw one of my employees, and I looked at him and I said, "Hey, you okay?" And he shook his head and said, "No."
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I knew we had to get him out of the scene, get him into a car, kind of treat him the best we could, as a support system. Yeah. And then, of course, we provided therapy and all those things that we always do, right? So that kind of like was a hot button for us to recognize that we probably need to do things differently after this situation. And we did. We imposed, we implemented a officer wellness program where we have a therapist come in. Every officer goes to therapy twice a year, whether they want to or not. They can talk about whatever they want. It's on duty. They get paid. I did it too. I went for this last session recently. It was cathartic. I thought. I thought it was a good thing. I was skeptical, but actually, I thought it was a good thing. And they've all really responded positively to it that I know of. No one has come to me and said, this is nonsense. I don't want to do this. So that kind of happened because of that first incident. And then, unfortunately, in September, and this might happen in a big city quite a bit, but here, this has never happened in York County. We had 3 officers shot at another incident and killed, and a 4th officer shot at that incident. Well, actually, 2 other officers shot. So 5 officers shot, 3 killed at an incident, right, in September. So that was that process was already in place. It was moving forward, and then every department, I think, in the county has kind of jumped on this, right? Because we all recognize how important it is now. I mean, I think we all recognize that mental wellness or officer wellness was important, but we're actually doing it now. We're actually taking the proactive steps to do it, and it's really been a good thing. We pursued it here. We had this therapist come to the township, and we use the firehouse, and the officers go and meet with them. And so far, so good. It's been really productive. I mean, that's an abbreviated version of what we're doing, but that's what we do.
Thank you for sharing. And
Sure.
I think, it's a really important thing to kind of circle back because I think a lot of leadership are questioning should these things be mandatory? Should they not be? And there's a lot of fear, I think, of pushback, or losing people. And for you to say, hey, we haven't had anyone come out and say that this is nonsense. And this is something that we're doing proactively to make sure that we help our people in the best way that we can, I think is important to kind of circle back to, because I think a lot of people are questioning, should it be mandatory? Should it not be? And for you to say we've had really positive results with being proactive and making it mandatory is,
Yeah.
a message for anyone who's maybe on the, you know, on the borderline of, which one do I do? Where do I go?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a shift in the culture too. When
Mhm.
I started in the 80s, if they'd have done this in the 80s, it would have been a huge resistance to it, I think.
Mm.
Now they're more open minded about it. And I think it's more accepted, obviously. And even when an officer would come and say, prior to this, right, we had a system in place where an officer could get assistance, right, through our insurance or whatever. If they had psychological problems or a drinking problem or whatever, we get them employee assistance. Well, this is just a jump on that, right? Like it's like an addition to that. We have the employee assistance program, but now we have this going as well. So if they have more problems than the two sessions that a year do, they can use their employee assistance program and go get additional counseling or whatever else they need, right? So all those things are available. There has been in the history of policing, obviously, a resistance to that. I see less resistance now than ever. So
Yeah.
it's been a good thing.
Yeah, and I think that's an important reminder. We all have our own perspectives. And I think that
Sure.
the way that we see the world is based on our past experiences and, the way that we were brought up and, our preconditioning to things. And I have been guilty of this a lot, and I've had to be checked a few, probably more times than I want to admit, but where I have this idea and I think, they're not going to like this because of XYZ. They're not going to do this because I believe that, and what I believe is maybe not necessarily the reality. And I've been surprised a lot of times where I'm like, nope, this isn't going to be successful. And then we try something and it is successful. And I'm like, wow, I was wrong. And so I think sometimes we have to look at things from other lenses, and
Sure.
understand, just because it's not something that maybe you grew up with doesn't mean that this generation or, the future generation aren't going to be receptive to it.
Right. Well, a good example of that, I think, just came into my head. When I started in policing, you couldn't have visible tattoos and you couldn't wear a beard, right? Well, our department, I can tell you since I've been here, uh, we hire people now with tattoos. There are limitations, obviously, but I felt it was unfair to restrict people that have tattoos maybe on their arms or hands or whatever from this job because it's, in today's world, it's a common thing. It's more accepted. And people from the military have tattoos a lot of them do it in the military, right? So why would you keep yourself from taking those applicants because of that? And people just don't care anymore. I've had officers that work at our schools that had sleeve tattoos, and the kids seem to respond positively to it. So it's not the same thing as it used to be back in the day. The beard thing was a little harder for me, but I don't grow facial hair. I don't do it, but I have people here that do. They look professional. They keep it trimmed. It's not like a bushy beard. We keep it to a 3 millimeters, right? That's the policy. And, they tend to try to stretch that a little bit, but we do a pretty good job of policing that. But they're allowed to wear a beard now. And that was never allowed back in the 80s and 90s. That just didn't happen. So
Yeah.
things are drastically changing in that respect. And that's a good thing, I think, in a lot of ways. You have to be open minded, and those older ideas sometimes are antiquated. This was something for me that it was not hill I wanted to die on. So I just said, hey, if it makes the guys happy, and jokingly they said, Chief, if you let us do this, our morale is going to go through the roof. Well, it probably did for about 2 months, right? but yeah, they'll find other things to be unhappy about. So, it's just kind of the way it is. But I felt like it wasn't worth the hill to die on. So I opened up the beard thing and the tattoos. I was 100% for, because I just thought that was kind of dumb to not let people work who have a tattoo, and we do have a policy about it, and there can't be anything, of course, offensive, but um, most people, especially in this profession, don't go down that road. It's respectful. And, you know, sometimes people use that tattoo to tell the story of their life, right? They have all those things that indicate things about their lives. And if they want to share that, they share it. If they don't, it's their own business. But it isn't an issue anymore for me. I'm over it. So,
I see you walking around the agency with a ruler measuring everyone's
well,
mustache and
no,
beard.
but right. But there are, I do have some people that tend to push it. Right. And then I'll
Yeah,
be like,
for sure.
hey, you better you better trim it up a little bit, or I'll change the policy or whatever. And
Yeah,
I say that jokingly because I probably won't, but
yeah,
I don't want them to get the wrong idea that I'm not cracking down on it. So
sure.
we do
Yeah,
keep it in check. We keep it in
yeah.
check. Yeah.
I had a couple things to say. So I had an officer one time. I actually want to say it was a chief that said this, but they had tattoos like full sleeves, and they're like, I look like the community that I serve.
Mhm.
And the community responds well to that. There's like a human element to it. And so they
Yeah.
found a lot of success in, the relatability of, looking like the people that you serve in that way. We had to do, I know a lot of agencies in Arizona had to change a lot of policies too because they didn't allow tattoos. And so a lot of the people who had tattoos had to cover them with long sleeves. Well, we live in an oven and it's 120 degrees outside, and so they allowed their
Yeah.
officers to wear short sleeves and show their tattoos as a way to be more comfortable. And it was a part of wellness. But one of the things that I heard one chief say this, I thought it was really interesting. They said that because everyone's trying to figure out incentives, or how do we get people to take care of themselves, how do we, outside of the mandatory things that a lot of agencies are implementing, as far as some of the other wellness initiatives, how do we get people to go to the gym, how do we get people to take care of themselves? And one chief said that they have a policy that's no facial hair, but one of their incentives is if you do these things, you can have facial hair. So it's still a policy, but
Good idea. I
the
like it.
incentive is okay. Well, if you do these things and you do like, these wellness activities, then you can have facial hair. So now all the people with facial hair are walking around and everyone else is like, I want facial hair too. So now they're, starting to do those things. And I thought that was really creative of like, how do we get people to do it? And maybe those are the things that people care a lot about and are willing to take that step in order to get there.
Right. Well, I don't know what kind of labor issue that would create, but I would fear that that would definitely create some type of grievance. So I don't know, great idea, but I don't know if that would work here.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that about the heat because that's kind of what stimulated me, what prompted me to do the policy change about tattoos. I had an officer that had a sleeve tattoo, and I was making him wear long sleeves to cover it at the time because we had a policy where there's no visible tattoos. We have a fair, and they have to walk at the fair in July. And I looked at him. He came into the meeting room where I was during the fair, and I looked at him, and he was soaked in sweat. And I said to myself, "This is really dumb.
Yeah.
He's suffering because of this, and he's a good person. I got to open my mind up about this." So I did, and I changed it. So that was probably the most significant thing that made me open my mind to the tattoo thing. But now almost everybody I have here has tattoos visible. They
Yeah.
just they just do, and it's not a big deal anymore. And they've been good about it. No one's gone, done anything inappropriate. So it's been good.
Well, I like that a few things that you said earlier was like kind of asking yourself why, like when you're looking at things that you do, and this could be in any context, but when you're looking at it, can we ask ourselves those questions? Can we ask, why are we doing it this way? Is there a better way to do it? I
Right.
think is really necessary for forward, movement and growth. But also, for the tattoo part, for you to say these are good people. Do tattoos make people bad?
No, of course not.
So it's like, okay. And then you're like, is it worth them suffering, when they're good people and they're doing a good job?
Sure.
And so I think
Right.
having the ability in our lives, whether that's our personal or our professional lives, to take a look at the things that we do and ask ourselves those questions. Is this the most effective way of doing it? Or are we just doing it because we've always done it that way and we just haven't thought about it, And so how can we take those steps forward to make progress in a positive direction?
Right. And I'm sure there's probably a small group of people that look at that and say, oh, look at that. They let those cops have tattoos. And I'm sure that's going on, right? But it's a small group of people. And I
Mhm.
think the majority of the people look at the person for the person, not for, judge a book by its content, not by its character, right? Or whatever. I said
Yeah.
that the wrong way, but by
Yeah.
an appearance, right? Don't judge a book by its appearance or a person by their appearance, and make sure you get to know them. And I think if you're a good police officer, whether you have tattoos or not, or a beard or not, you do a good job. People appreciate that. They don't care. And that's really what matters at the end of the day. Do a good
Well,
job, do a good job.
yeah, I was gonna say that like when they're saving your life, I don't think they're gonna care if they
I
have a
agree.
tattoo on their arm. So,
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
my last question for you is for the younger generation. What words of wisdom would you share with them that maybe you wish you would have known when you were younger, or something that's helped you along the way that you want to pass on to them?
Okay. That's a tough one. Well, I'll tell you the one thing that I've really tried to push on my new people. Um, to This might be an odd thing for me to say to you in this way, but I told them to be better with their money. So we have an investment program that we do that is like a 401, but it's called a 457, right? And it's pre-tax money that you can take out of your paycheck and put in an investment plan. If you put it in the stock market or whatever vehicle you choose to put it in your investment program, right? And I said to them, if you put a little bit of money in there every month and forget about it, when you retire, when you get to the retirement age, you'll have enough, hopefully, that you won't have to work another job or you won't have to keep working, right? If you're smart. And I said to him, this one officer the other day, if I would have done that, and I didn't actually, I did a little bit, but not as much as I should have. If I'd have been smart and spent my money better and invested better, I probably would be able to do a lot more than I can do when I retire, right? So I try to stress that to them that financial wellness is important and maybe not buy that big truck or whatever they think they want to get right away. Be smart. Make sure you're doing the right things with your money. I know that's not law enforcement related, but it is because um, financial responsibility is important with your life and your job, and that can create a whole litany of problems that come back to the job. So I don't know. That's one of the things that I push on my new employees.
Yeah, I think it's completely law enforcement related, and I think it's completely wellness related. So
Yeah,
I appreciate it very much. And thank you so much for your time and coming on here with me today. I really appreciate it.
absolutely. Thank you. I was honored to be asked. Thank you.
Of course.